Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guest is Hugh Kent of King Grove Organic Farm in Florida. Alongside his wife, Lisa, he grows certified organic blueberries using an innovative, sustainable growing system. Recently, they've shifted from wholesale to direct retail sales, inspired by their experience with buyers and a belief in the potential of direct sales for farmers. Hugh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So give us a little bit of overview of like where in Florida you're located and like the size of the farm.
We're right in the middle of the state, in a geographic center. So if you stuck your finger in what looks to be the exact middle, that's where we are. A little bit away from the coast, so we insulated from most of the bad storms here, which is nice. And so this is a beautiful area, actually. It's part of the state that emerged from the ocean first. So it's the hills of Florida. So we have about 100 feet of elevation change on our farm, which is unusual for most parts of Florida. But there is a central ridge which runs down the middle of the state, which is the former ocean floor that has got a bunch of the sand hills that are retained. So it's an interesting geography, beautiful place. We like living here.
Okay, so when you say the sand, so are you basically still on pretty beachy sand? I mean, that type of sandy soil?
Yes, it's very sandy. It's Daytona Beach sand. So we have to use some of the lowlands, of course, which have got some swampy areas. Those are more fertile naturally. But where we grow the blueberries, we've had to create most of the fertility. We've had to work on the soil for 15 or 20 years before it's really productive. So that makes it a bit of a challenge, but it's been really gratifying to be able to create that kind of soil. And of course, we don't have any drainage issues with all of the sand, and that helps us in one respect. While the fertility was a challenge initially, we seem to have that under control now, and so the sand is beneficial in some ways.
Okay, so how many acres is your farm, or how many acres of blueberries? I guess too. Both questions.
It's 20 acres of blueberries, which is a pretty intensive form of agriculture. I'm used to citrus from my childhood, so that's a much more relaxed kind of production. Trees don't require quite as much attention, and you can farm a much larger acreage with the same amount of effort. But organic blueberries are quite a bit of work. The rest of the farm is another 180 acres, which we manage for habitat and wildlife. And we believe the management techniques are important because they are complementary for the farm. So we're convinced that if we have an abundance of different forms of life out here, they help the plants naturally repel their own predators. And I'm a big believer in this idea that you can have a low level of population of many different species of all kinds of critters, ones you can see and ones that you can't. And if you have an imbalance that starts on your farm, so long as in the surrounding areas you have at least a low level of presence of the potential predators, they will then increase in population in correspondence with your pest. And nature does like to seek a balance. And we've seen this over and over where we see something start to get out of control and I worry about it. And maybe formerly 15 years ago, I would have said, well, I gotta do something about this. Now We're much more willing to watch the process work. And we've encountered this over and over now. So something will look like a problem, and then very quickly there'll be a natural response, and then the problem will come back under control. We do still have to intervene occasionally, but it seems like less and less every year. It's been quite remarkable. So all that to say that we consider the rest of the property to be part of the farm, and we manage it in that way.
Gotcha, because that is what allows you to grow the 20 acres of blueberries.
Right. Right.
Okay, so let's talk. Let's kind of start talking about fertility, because that sounds like obviously the biggest thing that you've been working on. Earlier in your years at the farm, what were you doing for fertility?
Well, we used. I think for a couple of years we used a sort of a hot nitrogen, a sodium nitrate, and then most of the fertility, though, has come from a commercial organic product. It's a chicken meal, feather meal. It's nature safe. I think it's pretty popular among a bunch of organic farmers. But what we've been able to do over time is to decrease our dependence on that, and more our fertility comes from the decomposing organic matter that's around the plants. So the basis of our growing system really is to use the green manure, which is growing in the rows between the plants. And if you can imagine, our rows are 10 feet on center, and the blueberry beds are 4 feet wide. So we have a 4-foot wide bed, and then next to that, a 6-foot wide middle, and then a bed and a middle and a bed and middle. So 60% of the farm is this area between the rows of the blueberry plants. And in Florida, of course, the growing season is just so vigorous that we have all kinds of vegetation growing in between in those row middles. And we developed machinery, designed and fabricated it, and nothing really more elaborate than just fancy lawnmowers. But we mulch, we cut, mulch, and throw up onto the beds everything that grows in that 60% of the farm. And initially, I used to cover crop in there. So I would decide, perennial peanut, sun hemp, try different things, and ultimately just again relaxed a little bit and let nature take its course. And now we just use whatever grows in there naturally. So it's a wide variety of stuff. It's a weed is a plant out of place, right? But in some ways these aren't even really weeds because we like them there. And so whatever happens to grow there in that 60% of the farm is what we use to feed the 40%, the actual crop area. And we do feed the microbes in that soil also. We use fish emulsion, which comes from the Northeast. We used to use a fish farm product, which we didn't like for a number of reasons, but some of these fish plants in the Northeast, they just produce a lot of byproducts. So whatever is left over from their processing is just ground up and filtered and otherwise raw. And we've had really good luck with that. So quite a bit of our fertility comes from that. But more and more, it just comes from the years of green manure that we've been putting up on these beds.
Now, okay, with blueberries, they want a low pH. How do you manage that?
We do that. We've got naturally fairly acidic soils, but our groundwater is not. It's basically neutral, maybe a little bit alkaline. So over time, we have been concerned about that. And a lot of the conventional blueberry farmers, they'll add various types of acid in order to keep the pH down. What we've done is come up with, it's really a dual purpose use of vinegar. So like a lot of organic farmers, we use vinegar as an herbicide, and Correct. We have our own little recipe that we've come up with, but it's basically a vinegar-based herbicide. Because of course, if you think of a row of blueberry plants, and if you can get up quite close to the plant, maybe an inch or two from the plant with the mowing, that's great, but you still have 2 to 4 to 6 inches right in the row, which you're not going to be able to touch. So we manage that with vinegar, and that's dual purpose. So the vinegar provides that weed control, and it also acidifies the bed. So I think I've heard of some blueberry farmers who have tried to use this process, but I think maybe if they go too heavy on the vinegar, then they have trouble growing the green manure. So our vinegar is pretty precise, very precisely targeted, and we fabricated our own little sprayer for that purpose. And so we can just manage a band that's maybe a foot or so in width, right along 6 inches either side of the top of that bed. Yeah, it's a good question. That's okay. I don't know how much stock I put in pH anymore.
Yes.
We don't chase it. We don't spend a whole lot of attention on it, but we do take a soil sample every year and try to keep it below 5.5.
Okay, so then let's focus on this vinegar a little bit because I actually feel that's a weakness we have, especially along our greenhouse edges on the outside. You can't quite get up to them with some places a mower and I don't want to weed whack it. So if I could go along and hit it with a vinegar, I think that would work really well. So talk a little bit more about how you guys make that work and how often are you doing that?
Oh, throughout the summer, we do it every day. So we're on a rotation where we spend maybe a tractor goes out for about an hour and a half every day and does a small portion of the farm. And then in the afternoon, then mows the previous day's area. So, it's just on a rotation where the vinegar is a day ahead of the mowing. We don't really like to do the mowing and then we've got a bunch of clippings and mulch that it's up on the bed and then we're just spraying that with vinegar. It doesn't make much sense. So we get the vinegar out in front by a day or two and then just rotate through the farm with the vinegar leading and the mowing trailing. And that works quite well. But we've noticed for sure a lot more efficacy if we're doing this early-ish in the morning, mid-morning. If we do it too early, it's not very effective, and if we wait until early afternoon, it's not effective. And I don't really know what to account for that. I haven't seen enough studies. This is the kind of thing that we would know more about if some of the research dollars that are spent on ag in this country were directed at organic. But of course, there's very little that is spent on organic research.
Yes.
So this would be like a primary area where you could benefit an untold number of farmers if you just come up with good protocols and best practices for using vinegar for weed control. But
Absolutely.
you just kind of have to figure it out for yourself. And at least in our climate, we've decided that around 10 o'clock in the morning is the most effective time. And that's just trial and error. You just watch and you say, oh, how did it do yesterday? How did it do? How did it do last week? And what were the conditions? And you just keep a record of those. And pretty quickly we realized, it's do it in mid to late morning. And even though the sun feels more intense and there's a lot more heat around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, we found that we just don't get much burn at that time.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. And then do you use a surfactant with that or?
Yeah, we've experimented with a bunch of different things. That's kind of a trade secret for us. And everybody's got their little proprietary blend. I don't know if anybody is any better than anybody else's. I think, and depending on what weeds you have and what your climate's like, I think you just try different things. And then, we always have been nervous because in our experience, we've basically pioneered this. So we didn't really want to try a bunch of different things without having an understanding of what the long-term effects on the blueberry plant are. Mm-hmm. So that's always been a bit of a concern. And I think anybody using this stuff should, keep that in mind. You got to be careful and spend as much time experimenting with your particular crop and see if you're not in a cropping area, like maybe on the edge of a greenhouse, like you're talking about, maybe that recipe that you find online commonly would work. So I think it's usually they've got some dish soap and some salt. Maybe I can't remember what's usually mixed in there, but there's a common recipe that you'll find online for just household use. We don't use that for our crop, but maybe in non-cropping areas, you can use something like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Talk a little bit about kind of like the management throughout the season for what does the blueberry cycle look like?
I know a lot about how it's done in the Southeast. I don't know a lot about the rest of the country. So some of this stuff may not be applicable and may sound strange for somebody growing in Michigan or, Ohio or New Jersey or something. But for us, it's the season. If you start in January, that's the dormant season. So plants start to go dormant in November, December, January, and the trick in Florida is to have enough chill, enough cold weather in the winter to get the plants to go dormant. If they don't really go dormant, they don't flower particularly well. And so they don't flower, they don't fruit. So we like to see some, in our part of Florida, we like to see some dormancy. So we hope for some cool weather in November and December, especially. There is an evergreen system in South Florida where there's no dormancy and they just keep the plant green the entire year. Our system is deciduous, so we like to have the dormancy where we are in Central and North Florida. So the plants will defoliate, and then the buds will start to form in over the winter, and then usually around Valentine's Day, mid-February, is when we start to blossom. So the plants are full of flower, and the fields millions of blossoms, very pretty. Doesn't smell, of course, but it's very nice to look at. And then the berries start to evolve out of the flowers. We have green berries in late February, early March, and we usually start picking in late March, early April, and it goes through usually Memorial Day, late May, early June, where we finish up usually first week in June. And then immediately after the harvest, the very last berry is picked, the next day we go out and hedge back the entire farm. So we cut very vigorously to stimulate growth and have more yield the following year. So that's the beginning of the next crop. Starts the day after we pick the last berry. So we cut our plants back, from about, it varies a little bit by year, but maybe they're 6 feet high by the time we get through harvest. And then we cut them down to maybe 4 feet, approximately 4 feet. We cut them very vigorously. And then in Florida, of course, with a mature root system and a semi-tropical growing region, they just go crazy. So they grow very, very strong throughout the spring and in the summer. And then once in the summer, we generally tip, which is the common practice around here. So we'll come back and prune again, but we're just taking off maybe 2 inches or 2 or 3 inches from the very tips of the shoots. And then those will fork. Commonly they'll fork and we'll have 2 branches there instead of 1, and we can increase some productivity there. But these plants love to be cut. And then we go through the season, the summer growing season, fighting weeds and trying to keep the plants healthy. And then as we get into fall, they start going dormant again. And we will do a pruning, usually January 1st, we'll do some hand pruning throughout the farm. But it's not like in northern climates where they do their primary pruning then. Our primary pruning comes in June.
Okay. And in that primary pruning in June, is that done all by hand, or is that something where you have some sort of machine that's just shaping the bush?
Commercially, it's usually done by machine.
Okay.
And there are various machines that people have come up with. There's a commercial machine called a Chopzilla. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen those in your region, but they're a couple of spinning, like a Batman villain type of machine. It's 2 circular saw blades on an arm, and the arm spins, and the blades whir, and the whole thing just kind of tumbles, and you can rotate it so that it goes horizontally, or it can be done vertically. So you can do the sides of the plants, and you can do the top also. And we did that for a number of years. We contracted that out. Somebody would come in with one of those machines, work their way around the blueberry farms in the region and do that. They're basically 3 flail mowers. It's another gruesome looking machine, but it's a flail mower on one side and on the other, and there's one on the top, and they weld these things together. And so it just is a tunnel, and they just go down the rows and create a hedgerow out of it. On our farm, we're 20 acres and it's organic, so we do it all by hand now. We decided that it just wasn't precise enough for us.
Okay.
So we wanted the control over, if you go down a row and you want to treat plants a little bit differently, and you see different varieties, you treat them differently. So we have 6 or 8 hedge trimmers and 6 or 8 guys, and we go out there, and it's a tough couple of days, but we do it in 2 days. And we just walk it, and I think it's just given us the best results. So it's
Okay. All
it
right.
can be done, and certainly if it's a smaller farm, then I think it makes a whole lot more sense to do it with hedge trimmers.
Yeah.
Keep them sharp,
Yeah,
makes it easier.
absolutely. Yeah. And so then you brought up a point, labor. What does your labor pool look like?
And that's a challenge for all of us, right?
Yeah.
It's really tough. Um, it we've developed the machinery and the system so that for most of the year, there's three of us that run this farm. It's my wife, myself, and one guy, and he's here full time, and he does probably now he's probably doing 70% of the tractor work, and I do 30% of it. I do a little bit more different times of the year. Um, and then my wife does everything.
Okay.
I spend a lot of time fixing machinery. E.B. White's old line about farming is 90% fixing broken things,
Yes.
and that's what it feels like. But we have it down to a system that where the weed control is very very much a standardized process, and we have a small hand crew that's been with us for a long time. Maybe uh, it's usually about 6 people, and we fertilize by hand because the fertilizer is expensive. So when we do put out a commercial nature safe, a pelletized commercial organic fertilizer, we do it by hand, and that takes 6 people, most of a day to do that. Just walk the rows and fling it out of a bucket, but we can be really precise that way.
Hmm.
And then the pruning, it's the same group of people, and so it's a small amount of labor for most of the year. And harvest, of course, is very different. So we have anywhere from 60 to 100 people here a day when we're harvesting. It's very, very intense. And most of the people, we have about 10 to 12 people that work for us directly, and we do the packing, sorting, and the packing and the shipping. And then the rest of the people come in as H2A with an H2A contractor. We don't manage the H2A ourselves, but we hire a contractor who uses H2A. And so we used to do it different ways, but this has worked out the best. And we found a contractor we really like, and we're on our 4th year with him. And we see the same people coming. He's bringing the same people each year, which we think is really good. So it means that they're not being exploited, and everybody seems to be happy with the situation. So that's worked out very well for us. But that's a huge concern. Well, what do we do if we don't have harvesting labor? We work all year and
Yeah.
have these berries out there, and we can't watch them rot. So, but we haven't had trouble with that in the last several years, and we're real happy with this H2A crew. We do have a harvesting machine, which is a backup for us. So if we, for some reason, lost all our labor, we could pull the machine out and harvest by machine. But we don't like to do that because we lose so much of the crop.
Gotcha. You lose crop, and I'm sure the quality of the harvest is just not there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So then, all right. So you're harvesting, and then in the field, what are they picking straight into like a belly bucket, or how are they harvesting them?
I'd like to talk a little bit about this. We get a chance before we're done, but we
Yeah.
used to go the traditional route with everything as far as processing and sales go, and it was a disaster. So I can let you know how it usually works for most commercial blueberry farmers in the Southeast. Is pickers will pick into a bucket, and then the bucket is poured into a lug or a tray, and then that's stacked. Those are palletized throughout the day, usually inside of a refrigerated truck, which follows the picking crew around. And at the end of the day, that truck goes to a packing house, a centralized packing house owned by somebody else usually, and there it gets sorted and packed and chilled and shipped out. We don't do that anymore, and we would have been out of business a while ago if we had stayed with that model. So we do everything on the farm now, and it looks different. So instead of, typically the cold chain is very important for blueberries. So you have to continually be going down in temperature. So you can't immediately chill them all the way down to 34 degrees, which is ideal, because you'd have to bring them back up in temperature in order to sort them, pack
Yes.
them, and so forth. And that creates condensation problems, and now you have mold and fungus and so forth. So you want to remove the field heat quickly, but you want them to gradually go down in temperature and never go back up. So what that usually looks like in a typical scenario is refrigerated truck at maybe 58, 60 degrees following the picking crew around, door gets open and closed. So it's probably warmer than that, but it's definitely not the 90 degrees that the berries can be at, if they're just ambient temperature. And then at the end of the day, that truck goes someplace to a packing house with a holding room, which is usually around 58 degrees. Spends overnight, maybe spends another day. And then after that, it goes into a packing room at 55 degrees where it's sorted and packed. And again, just for safety and comfort, people aren't going to be working in 34 degrees. So they're at 55 still. And then when that process is completed, then they go to a chilling room and they're brought down to 34 degrees and they stay at 34 degrees cold storage through the transportation, process until they get to a DC and go on the store shelf. So that's how it's normally done. And we don't do it that way here anymore. So we bring the berries out of the field and immediately sort and pack them, and then take them straight into 34 degrees. So this has been really helpful for us, and we've noticed an enormous quality and shelf life difference. So just eliminating 2 days of keeping the fruit in the 50s makes a huge difference. And we've watched that, we've experimented with it, but you leave berries out at 55, 60 degrees for 2 days, they start to get compromised. And maybe 4 days, now you're talking about them not even being saleable. So there's just an enormous difference in quality if you can get them cold quickly. So we've just developed our own process to do that right on the edge of the field in a small packing facility. So we bring them out, sort, pack, and right into 34 degrees. And we designed the interior of the cold room so that there's quite a lot of circulation and there's air going in between the boxes, and the boxes were designed for quick cooling. So they're down at the temperature we like within a few hours, which works great. And then we don't, we can get into it later, but we sell everything retail now. And quality is of course a big distinguishing factor for us. But the cold chain is a big part of that.
Yeah. Okay. So then harvest in the field, into buckets, into your packing. Now, do you have in your packing facility one of those automatic sorters / cleaners, or is anything still done by hand?
No, we do it all by hand. So we have a couple of inspection tables, and we've just found that, budget's part of it. We can't afford a real sophisticated sorting setup, but there's really, if you're dealing with, we don't like to throw out anything good, and of course the mechanized systems have to make some sort of compromise. So they if you set them up so they're grading too hard, then you're losing a lot of good fruit. If you set them up so they're not grading hard enough, then you got a quality issue in the final product. So we've found that with a good size enough crew and a couple of inspection tables going, we just do all the sorting by hand. And we do ask our pickers to be pretty discriminating also. And we have an initial sorting which happens out in the field. We have a wagon which pulled by a tractor, which is where the pickers bring their buckets in, and they when they first pour them out, they're expected to spend a couple of minutes with one of our people, and they go through the tray. So it does a couple of things. It gets rid of the obviously bad stuff right away, and then it also makes them a little bit more discriminating when they pick, because they realize, well, I don't want to waste my time up there sorting stuff, and of course we don't want to pay them to pick fruit that we can't sell. So we do that first initial step, and then that just increases the baseline quality of what comes into the packing area. So the sorting is important, but we may try something different this year because it is pretty slow. We spent a lot of late nights the last couple of seasons where we're still sorting when we should be wrapping for the next day. Um, but yeah, we've been pleased with it, and the quality is fantastic. We're really happy with the final product.
I know, the holidays aren't even here yet, but it's never too early to start dreaming about your spring planting. At the Farm on Central, you can pre-order willows, elderberries, blackberries, blueberries, ginger and turmeric, and more right now to guarantee you'll have your favorite varieties ready to plant when the planting season rolls around. We've got over a dozen new varieties this year, with more being added every day. Whether it's cuttings in February or rooted plants in mid-spring, get ahead of the game and pre-order your spring plants today at shop.farmoncentral.com. That's shop.farmoncentral.com. All right, so let's talk marketing and sales, because it sounds like you used to be into the conventional stream. And was that an organic conventional stream? So there was still certified organic going to grocery stores?
Yes. And this is I'm going to share my experience here, and I would really, I'd really find it incredibly helpful if some of your listeners, if they have had the same kind of experience, I'd love to hear from them. My suspicion is, farmers don't talk about this with each other much. And my suspicion is that we've all been treated pretty much the same way. And it's an unworkable system. And people are just going out of business left and right. And I think a lot of it has to do with the wholesale system. It's just not. I don't believe at the moment that it's just viable for medium and small farms. Maybe it works great for the industrial scale farms, but I don't see it working for the rest of us. So I'll describe my experience, and I have talked to enough people that, when I start this story, they say, yeah, I went through the same thing, or I'm going through the same thing. So for the way it works and I'll just talk about what I know intimately well, which is blueberries in the southeastern United States. We have a system where if you're selling into the wholesale market, like we're too big to move this product in farmers markets or a U-pick. We just can't do it. We would be approached by marketers. So these are people who do not take title. They don't buy anything. They don't take title to the crop. All they do is say, well, we're going to get you the best prices. And we would say, okay, well, what's that mean? And they were, well, these are the best prices. We have the best connections. We have, connections with all of these retailers, Whole Foods or Costco or Walmart or Publix or Stop and Shop or whoever it is. Well, how about a floor? Can we get some sort of floor price so that we know at least there's a minimum? No, we don't do that. So then they present you with a contract, and the contracts that I have seen have all been virtually identical. And they first you waive your PACA rights, so the rights that you have through the federal statutes that are supposed to protect farmers. You waive those, and then you waive all accountability as far as documentation. No, there's no, the contract says we're not required to show you what we sold these for. We're not required to show you who we sold them for. We can broker them. We can re-broker them. We can basically sell them for anything we want. And that's how it works. So, and if you say, no, I really don't like that, I can't sign something like that, they'll say, okay. And then you'll talk to somebody else and you'll be presented with basically the exact same contract. They all know what's in each other's contracts, and they all say the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's a take it or leave it contract. And then they sell your blueberries or whatever your crop is. And then at the end of the year, they say, here's what we say we sold it for, without any supporting documentation. And they take out a, pre-agreed upon commission, and they give you a check. And the farmer's reaction invariably is, well, how in the world can that check be so small? And they say, oh, well, geez, after what you told me, oh, well, the market was really bad this year. There was a there's a bumper crop in Georgia, or there was, California was bringing on a bunch of fruit. Oh, well, Um, so this is really difficult, of course, because we're basically manufacturers. So we manufacture a product, and we know what it costs. We get a pretty good idea what it costs us to do that. We know what it costs to grow. We have very little idea of what we're going to get paid, and under this system, we have no control over what we're going to be paid. None. Um, so I went through this for maybe 3, maybe 4 years before I realized that this is just a great way to go out of business. And each year there was a different excuse for why prices were only a fraction of what they were represented they would be. And it was really, for me, really galling because, um, we tell our kids that there's 4 things you have to do to make a living in this country. You have to work hard. You have to have, understand what you're doing. You have to gain knowledge in your craft. You have to have capital. You have to invest capital into this, and you have to take risk. So here are the farmers, and they're doing all the work. They're doing all the work necessary to, get good at what they do. They're doing all the work to, produce something for a course of a year. They're putting a lot of money into these farms, and they're taking all the risk. So, and then the people that are in the middle between the farmer and the stores, they're not investing anything. They got a phone they carry around in their pocket, in a car or a truck or something. They don't even necessarily have an office. They don't put any money into it. They don't do a whole lot of work. They take absolutely no risk. So they make a few phone calls, arrange trucks and that kind of thing. So it's a huge problem, and they walk away with all the money. So we decided we're just not going to do that. And we thought, well, for several years, we thought maybe what we can do is we can sell direct to the stores. So that's going to require us to have our own brand. So we did all the work that's necessary to do that, packaging and the logos and so forth, and getting all of the GTIN numbers and, extra levels of regulation and so forth. So now we have a package. And we found a packing house that was willing to package under our name. So we could say, put these in our packaging, and we'll take care of the sales. And then we spent several years trying to go around and see if we could sell farm direct to these stores, which generally like to promote that I think it's a form of greenwashing, but they say, oh yeah, we buy direct from farmers. There's a few of these stores that are kind of, they trade on that. That's all prominent on their websites, but it's not true. My wife and I just pounded the pavement. We went to every store. We talked to every buyer. We went to all the produce shows, and we, basically stalking the buyers. And, geez, sir, please, can we please get onto your store, and, it was really miserable. And they just don't do it. It doesn't work that way anymore. They all want to go through a marketer or some sort of consolidator, so that they can just pick up the phone and say, I want a year's supply of blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, and strawberries. They don't want to. They're not set up anymore to deal with farmers. They don't want to do it. Even pretty good scale farmers. We're not a big farm, but we're not tiny. So the only store we had success with was Whole Foods. And we sold to them for 6 years, and for a few of those years, we had an exclusive in the Southeast. So we supplied all of their Southeastern stores from our one little farm during our growing season of about 8 weeks, and they were great to deal with, and we were allowed to sell directly to the distribution center, and we trucked it down to Miami, and they took it from there. It was a good relationship, but after Amazon bought Whole Foods, that disappeared as an option for us. And they're obviously, need a lot of volume, and they weren't really interested in dealing with us when they can deal with a huge multinational out of Mexico and Chile and Peru. Mm-hmm. So all that to say, we were really discouraged and disgusted with the way the process works and the way the American farmer is treated in all of this. it's no wonder that domestic production is absolutely disappearing. The latest figures I saw is that for vegetables, we grow a little bit less than 60% of what we need. So we're not feeding the world. We're not even coming close to feeding ourselves. For fruit, it's even worse. So we're growing less than 40% of what we need for fruit in this country. We're importing all the rest of it. This is, pretty bad state of affairs. So that's a longer discussion because there's other factors involved in that. But a big factor here is this consolidation in retail stores and this tight control of distribution by these middlemen that are that control access to the stores. The stores won't deal with you direct, and you have to go to these people in the middle. And it's not. They're just there. They're just there to take your money. So we decided ultimately. We said this is terrible. We grow a really good product, and we can't make a living, can't make it work. So we started to move towards retail, and we thought we're too big to do that. Again, we're not a huge farm, but we can't do this in farmers markets. Hard as we tried, restaurants, farmers markets, you pick that kind of thing, just doesn't work. Maybe if we were right in an urban center where we would have a bigger population base to come to the farm, that might be another matter. But we're not close enough to any big cities. So we thought, well, this is how are we going to do this? But we just started in, and we've been shocked at how successful it's been. So this is, if I've got any, useful message to some of your farmers, it's that I hope they'll investigate this and recognize the potential, because our food system has been so dumbed down and the quality of our food is so poor that there are a lot of people out there that are looking for food the way they remember it used to be, for taste, for nutrition, for the way the land is treated. There are a lot of people out there, and you don't need the whole country to be enthusiastic about your product. You just need, in our case, we need about 20,000 customers, and that's not a lot.
No.
So I think it's a very viable way to go forward for a lot of farms. And I just actually this week I saw something in one of the trade rags about online grocery sales and just how big they are. But was really shocking to me was the high percentage of online grocery sales which are being delivered by third party. In other words, the stores, of course, have the you can pick it up at the store after you order online, or they can ship it to you. But there's also just and I'll say, and look at the number here. Ship to home includes common and other parcel carriers. $4.9 billion in the third quarter of 2024.
Wow.
So it was 11.5 billion picked up at the store, 10.9 billion delivered, but almost $5 billion worth shipped to home by common carrier and parcel carriers.
Yeah.
So that's the group we're in. That's $5 billion in the third quarter of 2024, and this is all going up at around 15% a year. So people are getting used to the idea of buying their groceries online and having them delivered. And I think if you can distinguish yourself with quality, lots of people are willing to go find that berry, or go find the meat, or go find other products that are coming from actual farms, especially if you're talking about organics and real organic farms as opposed to hydro. So there's, if somebody is really motivated by nutrition or taste and flavor, they'll seek you out, and you it's surprising how fast you build a loyal customer base. And my wife and I are, it's a very different way of living for the farmer. Also, we used to just listen to marketers tell us how lousy our product was because they thought if they could degrade the quality, that they'd get it for a nickel cheaper. And so we used to get these manufactured quality complaints, which was infuriating because we know what the quality is when it leaves here.
They were trying to get a retailer to say, "Oh, I got bad berries," so that you would uncharge them. Yes.
Right. And instead now we just get these love letters every day. So everything goes out to retail customers, and we get people unsolicited testimonials. They just write back to us and say, we're so happy you're doing this. We haven't had a blueberry like this since we were kids, or this is the best I've ever had in my life. And we just get a constant stream of that. And it's, I think a lot of us as farmers, one of the reasons we do this is because we care about people. This is a way we're growing good food for people. It's a way to care for other human beings. It's a way to care also for our land and for our environment and for whatever lives here. But fundamentally, a big part of this is you're just trying to feed people, and it's very different to wake up to that kind of reaction, and it's very motivating, and it makes the daily work a whole lot more meaningful and gratifying. So I just I don't really have a magic formula for anybody. It took us quite a while. We experimented for 4 years because there's not a lot of people that ship fresh blueberries, nobody we could copy. So it took us quite a bit of time to come up with the packaging and the insulation and the gel packs and figure it all out, shipping around the country to our friends and family to get feedback and putting data loggers in the boxes and figuring out what we needed for temperature. And so it takes a little bit of effort, but once you get that nailed down, it's pretty easy, and it's really nice to be able to control the whole process yourself. And then one other thing I'd add, Michael, is that this year we did it for the first time because our harvest season is so intense, and it's a bell curve. So in the middle of the bell curve, we're picking a lot of berries. So we can't keep up with it. We don't have enough customers yet to sell everything out way in advance. So we did have some that we had to freeze in the middle of the season. We're just picking too heavy. We can't pack it and ship it fast enough. So we froze some. And then this year we came up with a retail frozen product. So we sell 20 pounds to people. We figured out how to do that with dry ice. And we ship that also second day air, which is almost all of our stuff goes second day. And the quality is excellent. It's just nothing like you can get in the stores. It's so much better. So we, again, only needing a fairly small population of customers to make this work. We now recognize we don't ever have to go to a wholesaler or a marketer again. We can sell everything retail. And, I would have said 5 years ago when we started in this direction, I would have said, no, there's no way, we can try and make this work. But now I say, yeah, we need more berries now.
Now you're ready to start packing more. Okay, so if folks go to kinggrove.com, that's where they can buy. Can they buy the frozen ones right now?
They can. Yeah, we're almost sold out. So I think we've got we sent out an email a couple of days ago encouraging people to buy now because I think we'll be done in another couple of weeks. And that'll be it for the year. And then another 5 months, we'll start back in with the fresh season.
Gotcha.
We're not great marketers, Michael. We're not really, my wife's pretty incredible. She started from zero and she taught herself all of the website and the e-commerce stuff and a little bit of marketing, but we're not great at this. I think we got lucky because we had some organizations promote us to get us some momentum. Once we had some customers, then of course they feed on themselves and there's word of mouth and so forth. But I really think it's a message that someone had given me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago and said, hey, do this. It's not going to happen overnight, but it'll happen faster than you think. And then the money's very different and the whole process is different, much more gratifying. And you take all of this reliance that you previously have on these people, and now you're just going right to the people who eat the food, and it's a much nicer relationship.
Now, sorry, I got sidetracked here because I want to come back to marketing, but I'm looking at a picture on your website of the blueberry fields. Are you doing all overhead irrigation?
Yeah, we do all overhead. We used to use drip when we started also, and then we used microjet. Because we didn't like how the drip was doing. So this is a pretty expensive mistake. And actually we had defective drip, which was part of the problem. and the manufacturer paid us all the money to rip it all out and put it in the microjet, which was nice of them. But then we couldn't get the microjet to work the way we wanted it either. Part of the problem was that we're really growing a crop on 100% of the field. So if we're just irrigating the blueberries, we're neglecting our fertility source. So we have to actually grow that. We have to grow all of that green manure also. So we're using that water as irrigation water for 100% of the field. So it just makes a lot more sense to go with the overhead.
Yeah.
And we do have to have, in Florida, this part of Florida, we do have to have freeze protection. So in the late spring and the late winter, actually bud break is around third week in January. So starting end of January, we need to cold protect. And as we go through February and March, we go from bud to flower to fruit. It's even more cold susceptible progressively. So if we get a frost in March, we've got to protect that. Mm-hmm. And then of course, if you're using water to protect the plant, you've got to continually run the water all night. Can't shut it off, or else you'll supercool the plant, kill it. So once that water starts, we have to have the capacity in the well to, the wells have to be able to keep the entire farm in water all night long, and that's of course the overhead can do that. Microjet can't put out enough water to properly protect it. So we ice the plants over with it. So that's another reason we have to have the overhead.
So how many gallons a minute total then capacity do you have to keep 20 acres wet?
About 2,200.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's putting out maybe a quarter of an inch an hour of water. And that's sufficient. I wish we had a little more capacity, actually. If I were to redesign the farm, I would build in some more capacity, because depending on how dry and how windy it is, that may not be enough water. We've been fine. We haven't suffered any freeze damage at all since we started doing this, but it makes for kind of a hairy night. If you have a fair amount of wind and it's dry, you need more water. And if you're limited by your well production, then you're just kind of doing the best you can. Some farmers will do it that way. If they've got the capital to do it, they'll have more capacity in their well, and they'll even change heads out and go with bigger orifices for a freeze night.
Just to pour the water on. Their goal is just to pour a tremendous amount of water on.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Of course, there is a point of diminishing returns. If you're putting out too much, you can get an ice load on a blueberry plant, and you can start breaking the plants, especially as they start thawing the next day. There's asymmetric thawing, and so a lot of weight will come off one side of the plant. But they're pretty durable. The first freeze I went through was really hairy because I didn't know what to expect, and the plants actually collapsed the next day as the ice was coming off, and the ice structure previously was holding up the plant because it would form icicles that touched the ground, and then when those icicles started to thaw, then the weight of the ice up on the branches. So these plants were flat on the ground, and I thought, oh no, I'm wiped out. By 5 o'clock that evening, they were all standing back up like nothing had happened. It's pretty incredible that it's a durable plant. It's a fussy plant, but it's durable. And we'll go through a freeze, and there'll be a half inch of ice on every branch, on every bud, on every, if we have flowers out there, berries, berries encased in ice. And then by 5 o'clock that night, it's like it never happened. It's remarkable. Yeah. But you have to keep adding the water. The heat of fusion as the liquid turns to a solid gives off a little bit of heat. So inside of that ice, so long as water is continually on it, it'll stay at around 32 degrees, and that's okay for the plant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've always looked at that for strawberries, but we've always just done frost blankets. Although I would like to go to irrigation. But again, our soil's a bit heavier too. So if we put that much water in every night for 3 nights, our fields are going to be swamps. So we're not Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got different
Yeah,
challenges.
absolutely. All right, let's go back to the marketing because that is it's incredible to hear your story. Basically, you went from the completely broken system to a slightly more manageable system to that not working out to now you're full retail. And again, your website's good. There's obviously a couple things you could do there. Obviously, if you had able to have a huge marketing budget to throw into that, but it's it's great. It's functional. You can very easily check out. It's very clear what they're getting. Talk a little bit about kind of like, did you cold turkey this? Like, okay, all of a sudden 1 year we're going to sell everything, or was it more of a we're going to continue to keep a contract with one of those marketers just to move the overages as we start moving to direct to retail?
Yeah, it's very much the second one.
Okay.
Yeah. I, but I kicked myself. I'd heard this message when I started. People said, don't do this. Don't go into this business unless you have a market for your product.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, well, I can figure that out as I go along, kind of thing. When first few years of production won't be that great, and we'll figure this out. No, I wish I'd had that planned out better. But that's how, yeah, we did it as a transition. So I can't remember which year. It was probably 8 years ago, and we said, oh, this just isn't going to work. This is not viable. And initially we said, well, we're just going to see if we can make U-pick work. So we had designed 1/5 of the farm as being, we set it up for U-pick. So we started in with that one, and we pushed that real hard, did everything we could think of, but it just didn't get enough traction just because of the population around here. Then we started experimenting with the packaging, and like I said, that took several years to figure out. But there had to be a transition. We couldn't just we tried to do it as fast as we could. That was our goal.
And those packaging, I'm assuming that's custom packaging.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a difficult process. We found that to be a difficult process. It's very slow. If you're not a huge purchaser, they don't generally they're not all that responsive. You have to, I think, shop around and find a good company, find one that's not too big, where you're at least, you're a meaningful customer for them. But that took much longer than I thought it would. It's kind of an interesting industry. I think it's a kind of a little bit behind. Some of the packaging people are not that sophisticated yet. So I don't know what to say there. We like what we have now, but we had to go through a lot of different vendors for all the elements of our packaging before we found people we're good to deal with.
Yeah. And how important do you think the Real Organic brand has been for you? Because I know you've been a huge proponent of that.
It's been very important. I think, yeah, I feel very strongly about that, and probably because I'm growing one of the crops that was affected the earliest. So tomatoes and blueberries were two of the crops where we were confronted by this big change in the market. All of a sudden, our crop wasn't worth anything. Where did this come from? We were never getting good prices, but compared to retail. But all of a sudden, they were just junk. It's at the point now, Michael, where if you're in the wholesale business, they're basically paying you what it costs for you to pick it. So the calculation is all the way down to the point where they say, "Oh, we really got the farmer here, and he's got a decision. He can either watch his berries rot, or he can go through the enormous amount of work required during a harvest season, and then we'll pay him a little bit more than he'd get to have him rot. It'll still make sense for him to do it." And that's not including your costs of production for the rest of the year and all your overhead and everything else that goes into a business like this. So it's just horrendous what's going on. But it's because of all of this pressure from Central and South America, and these huge hydro farms. And they're now in our market window, it's Mexico primarily, but also Chile. And now Peru, and Peru has planted incredible number of acres, and they're affecting berry farmers all over the country now because they've got so wide variety of growing seasons that they're flooding the market and in the summer and in the fall also. Um, so we realized what was going on when we saw that the USDA was accepting hydroponic farms as organic, and that's the growing system in Central and South America. It's all hydro. It's very, very different, very different growing system. We're relying on, biologically active soil with billions of microbes that are, in relationship with the plant and that grow the food. The hydro systems are a brine of liquid fertilizers and, primary and a few trace elements, and they're dripped through an inert substrate that's holding the plant in a pot. And the USDA is allowing this to be labeled organic without any further qualifications is just crazy. The flavor is not there at all, and I don't believe the nutrition is. I don't believe the nutrition is anywhere close. And these are farms that use an enormous amount of plastics and fossil fuels, and in a lot of ways really degrade the environment. So to me, it's obscene that the public is being duped and that they're paying a premium for organic produce, and it's coming from these huge plastic hydro farms. Of course, I've given a bunch of presentations on that, but yeah, I feel really strongly about that. And so that's when I got involved with the Real Organic Project. And it was just coincidental, really, that because they're a well-known, highly nutritious, bioactive superfood, and they're small and easy to ship.
Yeah.
So a lot of our initial gift shipping went through the Real Organic Project because they wanted to use it as a thank you for a lot of their, some of their donors and their more active members. And we started doing it just for fun. We just started sending them around to people and said, here, in appreciation for your involvement, here's some Real Organic berries. And people was responsive, wow, I haven't tasted berries like that in a long time. And of course, it's because a lot of the organic berries you're getting are just like a lot of the other organic stuff now. It's hydro, and it's just not the same thing. So that was a big help. Real Organic was a big help in getting us started with this direct shipping and this direct to retail. And then we had some other institutions which kind of did the same. We have a bank that banks us, and they started sending it out to their customers and investors as an appreciation gift. And that was a wonderful way to kickstart the business. Then we had people thinking, wow, I've got a company and I've got employees and I've got vendors and accountants and lawyers. I'd like to show appreciation too. So they're starting to send these things around. And it grew quite well from there.
Okay, because on your website, you do have the corporate volume gift. And so obviously that's where that channel is.
Yes. Yeah. And that's been very effective because we offer somewhat of a discount, but mainly it's convenience for these for the bigger companies, and so they can just give us a spreadsheet and we take it from there, and then we can put gift messages or whatever of their own printed material they want in the boxes. But it's dual purpose. That's a product for us, but it's also getting our product out there to more people. And then, of course, when people receive it, then they think about it as a gift for somebody else or for themselves, or they just recognize, yeah, these are really good. I want to keep buying them. Then I want the frozen ones to get me through the rest of the year. So, yeah, it worked really well.
Very cool. So back to the whole, chili coming in from, South America. Is that something where you think there should be tariffs on produce coming from out of country to really push the U.S. involvement? Or what's your thoughts on how to solve that 60%, reduction in what we need to be supplying our own country?
Yeah, it's a big question. I don't have the answers there. My focus is on helping people become aware of the problem. I'm not sure what happens when we can't feed ourselves, or what's the plan? Are we going to rely on our military to go take food from other countries? It doesn't seem like a good plan to me. I think a big part of the problem, though, is just consolidation in general. So we've got consolidation almost everywhere we look, with huge corporations controlling, most of the market. Generally, antitrust and monopolies become a concern when 3 or 4 companies control 40% of a market. That's one of the standard. Sometimes they say 25% of the market, but certainly 40% of the market. We're looking at some of these agribusinesses that control, one company will control 60 or 70% of the market, just one company.
Correct.
That creates a real problem. And then at what point do they become too big to fail? Now we have our food being produced by companies that are too big to fail.
And being
so
bailed
now
out.
government has to kowtow to them and make the problem even worse. So I don't really, I don't know what the answer is. I do think that part of the answer lies in smaller farms. I'm a big believer in quite small farms. I think that if we could set this up so that farmers make a living, it's not a bad way to go. You're never going to get rich at it.
No.
It's not but it's a good way of life. You can certainly spend a lot of time with your family. You can do something that is meaningful, and that you can take pride in. And I think a more resilient food system, higher quality food, and a system that's more resilient to shocks like pandemics or border disputes or whatever, we'd all be much better off. I'm not really sure how you create the incentives to do that. But certainly, if we keep heading in the direction we're going, it's going to become less and less likely that we'll ever turn it around. I don't know if you follow J.M. Fortier's work or some of the farms that he has helped shepherd, but they do wonderful work, and that's basically their model. They're in Canada, of course, but they recognize the importance of small farms for communities, and they build whole communities around these farms where there's a lot of mutual support. And it's working really well. He's got I just love watching that. His whole mission is to just create thousands and thousands of these small farms. I'd love to see that. We've just been heading in the other direction for so long, and we ought to be waking up at some point here, because we're all suffering. We're suffering for what we're doing to the habitat, and we're suffering for what we're doing for our plant's ability to sustain us. We're suffering in the quality of our food, or we're suffering in the quality of our health. You can just walk around and look at people on the street in the United States, and you can say there's something very wrong with what these people are eating. And I think there's more and more awareness of that, but the answer is not to continue having bigger and bigger farms in Central and South America, I don't think.
No. And I think it's interesting, like Quebec specifically has given a lot of grants and support to small farms. So that's one of the cool things about, I think, and that's why you see a lot of those. I remember when I was doing some filming up there with him about some things, and I was talking to some of his workers who were there one year, the next year the government was literally going to go pay them to go start a farm. And it was, I think $20,000 a person or something like that first year. And that's really incredible when you have that kind of support. Obviously, you need to be educated. You need to know what you're doing to get the business off the ground. But having startup capital, at least something for the first couple of years, that's huge.
Right. There are an enormous amount of taxpayers' money which are going to support the status quo at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
And you probably saw the Paul Holmbeck's presentation about what they're doing in Denmark, and they're committed to getting their country to 25% organic. I think by 2030, something really. They're really committed to organic. They've just decided on a national level, this is what we want for our population. We're going to end up with healthier people, more productive people, and a better society if we, go after better food. And I think the Real Organic Project did the calculation for the United States. It was only like $19 billion to create the same level of commitment to organic food in this country.
Yeah, and how much do we spend per year on healthcare?
Yeah. I love those statistics about, it's inverted. It used to be we spent this much on healthcare and this much on food, and now we spend this much on food and we're spending this much on healthcare. It's
about
nuts.
4.8, I think, trillion Yeah, 4.8 trillion in just 2023 alone. So, if you said 19 billion, that's literally like, why wouldn't we just be throwing money at it and giving people free scholarships to go through a good 2-year how to be a farmer and with some business in it. And then, again, takes this land that we are, obviously, I think one of the biggest problems is that we have incentivized and we subsidize corn and soy, which on one aspect is going to ethanol, which is a net energy loss. We all know that. It's ridiculous. And it's just propagating more in pollution of the water table, more soil down the Mississippi River, creating a bigger dead zone in the Gulf. Last week, I was talking to a clam farmer who was talking about how the entire Apalachicola area is no longer able to grow shellfish because of how polluted it has now become because of the Mississippi and all the rivers coming out. It's awful.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it reminds me of Zephyr Teachout's recommendation. And she said, we're all aware that we're supposed to be voting with our dollars. We're supposed to spend money in ways that support the things that we recognize should be supported. But she said it also vote with your vote. Mm-hmm. There a lot of these decisions are made. A lot of these policy decisions are made by the people we elect, and seems like we're not headed in the right direction.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's such a multifaceted issue too, because not only are you trying to make changes there, but it's lobbying money, which is such a challenge right now. And that has to be fixed somehow. And I don't know how you do that. But the lobbyists are the ones in Washington that are just handing out money and keeping these systems propped up.
Yes, absolutely. And Congresswoman Shelley Pingree has often said, don't underestimate the food system lobby. She said they spend more money lobbying in Washington every year than the defense industry. That's a staggering thought, and that gives you some idea about why we're having trouble moving away from the status quo.
Well, we just put out a blog article on our farm website that talked about how the food pyramid is a swindle. I forget exactly what it was, but it got a lot of feedback. And because literally the food pyramid is, in some aspects, upside down of what you really should be eating. And that was created because lobbyists gave the USDA money. It's so mind-blowing how literally money runs everything. And we're kind of beholden to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I didn't agree with everything, certainly, that John McCain said, but John McCain was famous for saying, we'll never fix any of this until we get money out of politics. And I think he was absolutely right about that.
No, absolutely. All right. Well, Hugh, we've gone over an hour. I really appreciate your time. There's so much more we could talk about, but this was great. And thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing, Michael. It's really appreciated.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, sir. Just thank you and carry on. Carry on.
All right.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.